and a top Trump aide who's been running point on this stuff, the Commerce Secretary, when asked about whether we could be heading into a recession and whether all of this would be worth it, he gave an answer that was as astounding for its economic claim as it is for its political, tone-deaf positioning. Take a look.
Will these policies be worth it if they lead to a recession, even a short-term recession?
These policies are the most important thing America has ever had.
So it is worth it.
It is worth it.
Quote, it is worth it. That is what a gaffe looks like in real time. Number one, from Donald Trump on down.
Señores, imaginen que un presidente anuncia que va a estrellar un país solo porque vale la pena. Algo así es lo que está ocurriendo actualmente con la economía de Estados Unidos y el equipo, la administración de Donald Trump. Mientras el mercado tambalea, Wall Street está entrando en pánico. Políticos republicanos están en crisis y lo peor es que afirman que una recesión es hasta necesaria. Sean bienvenidos a Políticamente Desacuerdo. Señores, hoy hablaremos del colapso. La crisis de Trump acaba con miles de millones de dólares. Los banqueros se rebelan, mientras que el famoso equipo de Trump dice que la recesión vale la pena. Los invito a que se queden hasta el final de este video porque veremos muchos detalles, mucha información muy interesante. Pues bueno amigos, para quienes no estén al tanto, la economía estadounidense en este momento está viviendo una situación delicada. La volatilidad del mercado, el tema de la guerra comercial, los despidos masivos han generado una incertidumbre. Pero lo que sorprende no es la crisis en sí, sino cómo es que Donald Trump y su equipo lo están manejando. En lugar de calmar a los inversores y a la población, parecen estar celebrando el caos, como si todo fuese parte de su plan. Si no me creen, quiero que me acompañen a ver este clip.
The president threatening even more tariffs, and that's against warnings about a Trump recession. We have seen the retaliation continue. That's why it's called a trade war. And these are countries that we usually do not approach anything like an economic war with, let alone real wars. We are talking about long-standing American allies. Today, the news from Canada and the EU, billions of dollars of new tariffs, ranging from textiles, water heaters, beef, bourbon, many key American products. The impacts are immediate. The stock market continues a volatility that is driven by, partly at least, these Trump moves. We've seen that as almost a uniform opinion, and I'm going to show you some Wall Street Journal and other reporting on that in a moment. But today, in the last few hours, stocks are mostly flat. That comes, though, after a 10% slide, which the markets have not regained. Business leaders say that even if you were open-minded to some of what Trump wants to do, what the goals may be, this has been confusing, incompetent, and at times downright chaotic. And a top Trump aide who's been running point on this stuff, the Commerce Secretary, when asked about whether we could be heading into a recession and whether all of this would be worth it, he gave an answer that was as astounding for its economic claim as it is for its political, tone-deaf positioning. Take a look.
Will these policies be worth it if they lead to a recession, even a short-term recession?
These policies are the most important thing America has ever had.
So it is worth it.
It is worth it.
Quote, it is worth it. That is what a gaffe looks like in real time. Number one, from Donald Trump on down, not even the supporters of this trade war, this tariff policy, claim that they want to dive into a recession. You think about what America's been through from pandemic on and inflation on. No one in this last election cycle was asking for policies that would increase the odds of recession. The fact that I even have to say that as a partial fact check or context about what a U.S. official in charge of the economy is saying is itself wild. But second, politically, we've never seen this attitude towards a potential recession. Not from the Commerce Secretary Lutnick and not from Donald Trump himself, who over the weekend failed to calm markets by basically saying, hey, we'll see what happens, and we might have to buckle up for some tough stuff. Now, Why does this seem like such an extreme, hard-edged economic version of Trumpism, even more hardcore than really the economic agenda of the first Trump term? Well, one of the answers relates to something you probably know about if you follow the news, which is many of the moderating influences from law and the Justice Department to economics that we're talking about right now to foreign policy. Some of those folks who were around, the so-called adults in the first term, most of them are gone. What's left are people who, after an insurrection and all those indictments and all those other Trump problems, the people who still stand 100 with everything Donald Trump has been exposed to be, from ethics to policy.
There are a lot of unsettled people.
Sure. Let's first of all put this marker down. To the extent that the media fuels the recession, inflation kind of talk, that's going to push us into recession and inflation. Because what it does,
President Trump is the one that said that he couldn't rule it out, not me.
Let me just finish the thought here. My point is simply that there's a lot of people's hair on fire now, which is interesting because the last jobs report we got on Friday was robust. It was a robust report.
It's like 150,000 jobs.
Yeah, that's a good number.
That's what we're hearing from the White House. Well, let me tell you what they're saying today over at the Journal. Trump behaves as if his manhood is implicated because a foreign nation won't take his nasty border taxes lying down. And they continue on, which is why I showed you what they've been saying diplomatically, perhaps, for some weeks. Quote, "We said from the beginning that this North American trade war is the dumbest in history, and we were being kind." Well, Mr. President, you done got the Journal mad now. But of course, they're mad about something real. Sometimes, I've told you, all these bankers and Wall Street elites are following these quarterly earnings and other numbers that they care about for their investments, which the vast majority of Americans don't even benefit from, and that sometimes are in tension with labor and employee situations, right? Some of these companies, they make money by cutting jobs. Here, the Wall Street Journal, the investor elites actually are right now, at least for this moment, kind of on the same side of a lot of workers who don't think a recession or a trade war will help the workers of this country. And the economic fallout has Americans paying the price. A job is a job, remember. So as Trump and Musk cut the government, they're cutting jobs. There's many conservative attacks on government jobs specifically, the so-called bureaucrats, as Elon Musk might put it, but he's still slashing the total number of employed Americans in a haphazard way. Analysts note that if you want strong U.S. employment numbers, many of those ousted workers have to shift to apply for private sector jobs. That affects the overall job market. If they're not absorbed, the overall job market gets worse, partly in relation to Trump and Musk cutting jobs. You don't need an economics textbook for that part. These costs are hitting veterans, teachers, and students. There's cuts to weather and environmental safety staff. This hits all states, including the red states that back Trump, where you have over 970,000 federal workers in just those states alone. Republicans have noticed GOP politicians pleading with Trump to just at least stop these cuts in their own district. A classic not in my backyard, selfish sort of political survival mechanism, which Axios and others are reporting on so people can see, oh, you don't want it in your backyard, why should it be in my backyard? That's a type of political weakness, of course. Or there's public colleges, long a point of pride and, frankly, patriotic, populist opportunity in our country. State schools often enable the highest share of students to get to college. They have admissions programs, as you can tell from any sports match that you watch, game, set, match, where there are sometimes tens of thousands of current students because the admissions programs admit more people than the smaller, say, private Ivies. Now, President Trump cracking down on funding for universities, and he started with some of those big top research institutions. On this program, we just heard from a professor at Musician about the unifying role that colleges can play. That was last night as we learned about these cuts and the clear signs that the Trump administration wants to go further. What I'm showing you on your screen is relevant in the news and government tonight. If it looks a little out of pocket, please don't blame the messenger or the news. You are looking at the wrestling executive that Donald Trump tapped to run the Department of Education, Linda McMahon. Whatever her business qualifications, she's not an expert on federal education policy or procurement. She's known more for her ability to learn and perform in the ring, as she was doing right here. But it turns out they don't want her doing federal education policy. She's a placeholder running this department that Trump wants to eliminate. And they just took that huge step this week, ousting half of the staff of the Department of Education, closing major field offices. And the former executive of that wrestling group, McMahon, says she is there, again, these are her words, to shut the whole thing down like Trump wants as long as they can get Congress to agree. So listen to what their plans really are amidst the quite understandable protest and pushback.
That was the president's mandate, this directive to me, clearly is to shut down the Department of Education.
Save our schools! Save our schools! We want our tax dollars to educate our kids. Yeah. Not further line the pockets of Trump's cronies.
Thank you to my public education because I'm not stupid and I know better.
We know we'll have to work with Congress, to get that accomplished. But what we did today was to take the first step of eliminating what I think is bureaucratic bloat.
There can be no democracy without a free, universal public education.
That's the voice of the cuts and the voices pushing back. Now, there are many Trump actions that are extreme and unprecedented and are even being halted in court tonight as potentially unlawful. This talk, though, about shutting down entire agencies predates Donald Trump, to be clear. It goes back a long way in GOP politics. You might remember Rick Perry ran on basically ending not one, not two, but three agencies, which you'd think you'd have a strong feeling about if you really wanted to eliminate that many jobs in entire agencies, although he infamously struggled to remember which three.
The third agency of government, yeah. I would do away with the education, the commerce, and let's see, I can't. The third one I can't. Sorry. Oops.
Oops. It was seen as a gaffe at the time. It was a moment that hurt Perry among Republicans. He was still running in the Republican primary. But by the time Donald Trump took over this same party, Rick Perry was back in the spotlight. I want to remind you, Donald Trump appointed him to run one of his supposedly hated agencies marked for elimination, the Energy Department. Just as Trump has tapped McMahon now to run an agency they both say they want to eliminate. Let's take them at their word here. They're not saying they want the government to run better or more efficiently with regard to these entire agencies. They are saying they want to end it. No federal energy oversight, no national education leadership, a gutting of the expertise and the people, which has guided two things that, as a factual matter, Americans generally rely on: energy and public education. And I'm not really chuckling because it's funny, I'm chuckling because it's outlandish. They're saying if they can get away with it, no mosques at the federal level. Get rid of the public servants, the administrators, the teachers, all connected to this funding. And why? Why? Because Donald Trump is empowering self-interested billionaires and, respectfully, forgetful politicians who think it's really cool or sounds politically good to disrupt and destroy things, at least when they can remember which thing they want to destroy.
Ok, amigos, vemos, ¿no?, cómo funcionarios afirman con toda la tranquilidad del mundo, ¿no? La recesión es valiosa, que literalmente todo este caos vale la pena. Quiero que veamos los hechos. La bolsa ha caído un 10% en los últimos meses. Las tarifas, los aranceles, impuestos en esta guerra comercial con aliados como la Unión Europea, como Canadá, están generando represalias. Significa productos más caros, los cuales consumen los estadounidenses. Empresas que están despidiendo empleados para reducir costos, mientras la administración sigue insistiendo en que todo está bien. Los banqueros y Wall Street están al borde de la rebelión, porque incluso hasta ellos, que suelen beneficiarse de crisis económicas, ven esto como una bomba de tiempo, una que puede explotar en sus caras. No es una estrategia maestra, no es un sacrificio necesario, es simplemente una mala administración de la economía disfrazada de un movimiento audaz. La idea de que es necesario provocar una crisis para salir más fuertes es la misma lógica que usaría alguien que prende fuego a su casa para ver si puede construirla mejor después. Algunos podrían decir, bueno, tal vez esto sea parte de un plan mayor para poder fortalecer la economía a largo plazo. Amigos, seamos realistas. La historia nos ha demostrado que las recesiones afectan sobre todo a la clase media y a la clase baja, mientras los grandes inversionistas encuentran la manera de salir ilesos. Y bueno, cabe la coincidencia de que estamos hablando de un mandato que está siendo gobernado por millonarios. ¿Qué nos queda? Una administración que juega con la economía como si fuese un casino, que justifica el sufrimiento económico con frases como vale la pena. Mientras tanto, vemos a los mismos banqueros que antes hasta respaldaban a Trump, que muchos próximamente y seguramente en este momento ya le están dando la espalda, porque saben que esto podría costar miles de millones y hundir la economía más de lo que cualquiera esperaba. No importa de qué lado político estés, esto es simplemente irresponsable. ¿Qué opinan ustedes? ¿Creen que estas medidas tienen algún beneficio real o solo es algo que terminará hundiendo a la gente común? Los invito a que me dejen sus opiniones en los comentarios mientras pasamos a la siguiente noticia. Y es que, señores, MAGA, el movimiento MAGA está en pánico total. Están aterrados porque su presupuesto, como bien sabemos, estaba en el borde del colapso, ¿no? Están aterrados por lo que pasaría también si es que la aprueban. O sea, básicamente son dos opciones: cerrar el gobierno y quedar en ridículo por incompetencia, o aprobar su presupuesto hecho por y para los multimillonarios, enfrentándose luego a la furia de sus propios votantes. Prácticamente no hay una buena salida para ellos. Están tan desesperados. Este es el momento perfecto para que los demócratas contraataquen. Y si hay alguien que siempre está lista para hacerlo es Jasmine Crockett. No se anduvo con rodeos y le dijo sus verdades a Donald Trump, a Mike Johnson y a toda la cúpula MAGA en un discurso brutal. Así que veamos a Jasmine Crockett en acción.
Listen, he can't blame me for not wanting to be his doormat or for the Democrats not wanting to be their doormat. I mean, all we consistently hear from them is they have this mandate that the American people gave them. Well, I am saying that I have a mandate from my district, and it does not involve cutting Medicaid, cutting Medicare. And if we're going to just focus on this continuing resolution, let's talk about it, because I know you just talked to my other colleague from Texas, and he was boasting about the increase in pay for certain service members while not talking about the fact that those that have already served our country, our veterans, that they're going to lose so much of their care. We know that right now they're looking to cut close to 80,000 people from the Veterans Affairs. And then in addition to that, in this CR, all the money for bills that we've passed before, specifically that extra money that we put in for the toxic burn pits, they want to take that out. So it should not be a either or when it comes to those that have served our country or those that are willing to serve our country. And right now they're pitting them against one another. We see as they've decided they're not going to do any more town halls. So I don't know if Tony even knows what his constituents want, that they are consistently getting railed against because of the way that they're treating veterans by making sure that these firings, they're not standing up for the people, they're not standing up for the House. So no, I'm not going to vote for the continuing resolution. The Republicans control the House, the Senate, and the White House. If they want to get their draconian stuff passed that's going to hurt my constituents, they're going to do it by themselves.
And what's very worrisome is that so many veterans who work in federal government agencies are now being fired for various reasons as a result.
Approximately 1/3 of our workforce for the federal government, they're veterans.
Veterans, and we want to make sure those veterans are protected by all means. I want to play a little clip of what we heard from the House Speaker and get your reaction. So listen to this.
They're planning to vote down this simple bill. They are going to try to shut the government down. Every House Democrat will participate in this, it looks like. That would be a shame if it's true. I hope some of them will have a moment of clarity themselves and do the right thing, but it looks like they're going to try to shut down the government. It's a striking new posture for Democrats who have always said they've just been apoplectic about the prospect of government shutdowns.
You want to react?
Yeah, I'm going to say that we don't want the government to shut down. And frankly, this president has single-handedly not just been shutting the government down, but literally trying to dismantle it. And I haven't heard a word out of them. In addition to that, we know that we have been talking about impoundment, which is basically saying, hey, the power of the purse belongs to Congress. Well, guess what? Our speaker doesn't act that way. He doesn't get out there and say, hey, Mr. President, you can't do this. Once we've appropriated dollars, then these dollars are supposed to be for this. And one of the things that they're not talking about in this continuing resolution is the fact that they are going to give even more latitude. This is basically going to be a slush fund for Elon and Donald Trump. They are getting rid of the parameters around the spending. I think the comparison was that we have maybe 88 total pages of kind of whatever the parameters are for how the monies are to be spent, but the majority of the discretion goes to Trump and Elon. When we normally had, I think in our last one, typically we have about 2,800 pages.
We know there are a handful potentially, of Republican House members who are going to vote against the continuing resolution, and that could torpedo it. But do you see a bunch of your fellow Democrats voting for it to keep the government open?
Not that I've heard. And you know what? It's interesting that the speaker knows how to call out my colleagues, but this is their bill. So why not call out your own colleagues, the ones that elected you to be their speaker? Listen, Nancy Pelosi didn't have these problems. So if they need some help, maybe you should tune into a woman, because maybe it just takes a woman to get it done.
Like you, is that what you're saying?
That's what I'm saying.
And you're going to vote against the continuing?
I'm going to vote against it. Now, if they want to decide that they're going to start negotiating in good faith, remember our last continuing resolution? Remember, it was sunk because Elon decided to go on Twitter. And at this point in time, he had never graced the Oval Office. And so if this is how they want to govern, then you're going to have to get your own house in order. But you can't come to us and just say, here, take it. And we're supposed to say, yes, thank you so much for making us take it. That is not why we were elected. And we want the American people to see that these people cannot function. Well, you've been talking about a stopgap. Everybody's talking about a stopgap.
The continuing resolution.
The continuing resolution. But it's not a stopgap, right? Because for everyone at home, just know that our bills, when we do appropriations, they are for 1 year, right? And they go from September to September. This isn't a stopgap. They've not been able to pass their own appropriations bills out of the House in the entire year. And so now they want to do this all the way to September. They never would have passed appropriations.
I took notes of what the House Speaker, Mike Johnson, was saying, and he said this continuing resolution that's going to come up for a vote later today, which you will oppose, contains, he says, no cuts to Medicare, Medicaid, or Social Security.
Yeah, so it is interesting that obviously we passed the budget resolution, or they passed the budget resolution that is going to require them to go into these cuts, but they've not got their single bills passed. We've got 12 specific kind of categories. And so for everybody at home, when you think about it, when you're paying your bills, you've got your electricity, you've got your house note, you've got that. So that's what we do. We have 12 separate bills, and they've not been able to pass those 12 individual bills. And in those, that is where they are prescribing for the cuts to those specific programs. Now in this, they are prescribing other cuts, such as they want to get rid of money that was in the Inflation Reduction Act, and they want to take back monies, obviously, for our veterans and things like that. So I don't know if they ever plan to actually go through the 12 single appropriations bills going forward. I mean, when you're passing a continuing resolution for the entire fiscal year, I don't know why they won't try to keep doing this.
Vuelvo y repito, amigos, MAGA se encuentra atrapado en un callejón sin salida. Simplemente es la consecuencia de sus propias decisiones. Siempre presentan opciones pésimas y ahora están pagando las consecuencias. Aquí hay algo que hay que dejar en claro. Los demócratas tienen que seguir empujando este mensaje sin importar qué pase. Es de gratitud ver cada vez menos periodistas que preguntan si es que tenemos la responsabilidad como demócratas de evitar el cierre de gobierno. Y la respuesta es simple: No, porque los demócratas no están al mando. No es el trabajo de los demócratas evitar que el movimiento MAGA destruya el país. Eso sí, lo que sí tienen que hacer es asegurarse de que la gente no sufra por culpa de la incompetencia, ¿no? Pero no echarles la culpa, eso sí que ya no, porque literal, amigos, eso es hipocresía. Hablando justamente de hipocresía, Yasmin Crockett no solo se quedó en el tema del presupuesto, ya que también aprovechó para exponer otros puntos claves que también tenemos que verlos. Veamos este clip.
Let me ask each of the mayors, just yes or no. Have any of you been made aware of any immigrant that has had 34 felony convictions that has still been able to roam around in your cities? Anyone?
No, ma'am.
34 felony convictions.
No,
from the
Congresswoman.
immigrants. Anybody?
I'm not aware.
Oh, okay. I'm just curious because we are so concerned about crime, and I know that my Republican colleagues would never want anybody with 34 felony convictions roaming around because that could be a danger to the community, but I will move on. The Republicans put more effort into producing their little propaganda trailer for this hearing than they have into reforming America's immigration system, and that's why we're here today. In fact, Republicans are beating up on the vast majority of you about what you're doing for your citizens, but the last time I checked, you're actually showing up. You may or may not be aware, but the NRCC just instructed Republicans to stop their town hall meetings because their constituents were showing up and telling them to do your jobs.
Bueno, amigos, yo creo que no hay alguien mejor, ¿no? Seamos honestos. Literalmente, ¿será que existe alguien mejor en este momento que Yasmin Crockett para exponerlo? Porque yo no lo veo. Es de lo mejor en exponer este tipo de contradicciones, ¿no? O sea, decir cosas sin filtros y con total claridad. Por eso, amigos, es que me encanta traer varios de sus intervenciones. Muchas gracias por acompañarme hasta el final de este video. Como siempre, si me quieres apoyar, regálame un like, comparte el video con tus amigos y suscríbete a nuestro canal Políticamente en Desacuerdo. Nos vemos en el próximo video. Hasta luego.